Hey everyone! So this week I think you'll hopefully be pleased to find out that we are finally going to get into some visualization. I think that this will help clarify some of the sort of exercises that we've been doing using for loops, maybe some conditionals, and also sort of start to get us into the nuts and bolts of actually expressing information visually online in an interactive way and kind of what it takes to do that with real data. So right now, the page that I have open is the Google Charts gallery, and we're going to use a sample bit of code from here as a way to sort of launch ourselves today into working with some real data, seeing how we need to manipulate that in order to get things going, and how we can make changes to it. So I'm on the chart gallery. I'm actually going to select the overview here and go to this Hello Charts link, and I'll share this link online. What's nice about this is they have some code samples here for us. So we can see something like this, which is a pie chart, and of course we can see they've actually followed some reasonably good visualization rules so far with this. But what's particularly handy is that they give us this code snippet here. And I am actually just going to copy and paste this, select the whole thing, copy and paste it right out, and go ahead and launch Atana Studio so that I can test this out on my own computer. So just as a refresher, I'm going to do a quick creation of a Git repo here as I do this process. So it's going to say get started. I had closed everything out, so I'm just going to say, just give me a new HTML file, and I'm actually just going to replace everything in this file with what I just copied from that web page. So I'm literally just going to select that and just say paste straight over it, okay? And now, of course, I'm going to save my HTML file, so I go save as, not in here. I've already created this first chart thing, and so I'm going to also call this index.html, just because that's an easy default. And right off the bat, I want to open this up in Chrome and take a look at it so that I can see if, in fact, this worked as advertised. And voila! I actually have a chart running locally on my computer that I can see. Now we're going to sort of look at how we can customize this, and again, how we can start to get data into it. So before I do that, I want to just do an initial commit here. So I'm going to open up Terminal, and I'm going to go to my desktop, into my DataViz. I think I call this first chart. Right, so I'm going to do an ls. I see, okay, there's my index. I'm going to say git init, and then I'm going to say git add index.html, and I'm just going to say git commit to label my first commit here. And I have to put a message in there and said initial commit of Google example. Okay, so just getting started right away here. Sort of best practices. There we go. So a couple of things that I want to point out here before we sort of dive into customizing this. Kind of the pieces of what's happening on the page. So first of all, just want to point out that in this case actually we have our head tag, right, is actually where all of the action is taking place. And then the rest of it in our body, we actually just have one div that has an ID of chart div, and we'll talk about IDs in class. But basically, I just have this one div, and everything else is happening in JavaScript up here. So inside the head tag, I have this first script tag, and this comes pre-commented from Google, as you can see, so reinforcing that commenting is best practice. And this is basically, so what this is doing is it's loading the Google visualization library. So again, you can think of a library like a cookbook. Basically, it's a way, it's a bunch of code written by, all it is a bunch of code written by other people that is sort of generic enough that we can hand things off, we can hand tasks off to it, right? So it's like if you were having a holiday party and maybe it's Thanksgiving, let's say, right? Take an American holiday, and you say to somebody, and somebody says, oh, is there anything you can bring? You say, yeah, can you bring the cranberry sauce? And to somebody else, can you bring the mashed potatoes, right? You don't have to give them the recipe for cranberry sauce or mashed potatoes. You just kind of name it and say that's the thing that you can bring, and then when they show up at your house, hopefully they have cranberry sauce and mashed potatoes. It's the exact same thing here. There are these recipes that are defined in the Google visualization library that do things like load data, that can actually draw a complete chart. And so these are really powerful recipes that we can draw upon to generate interactive visualizations without having to write so much code ourselves. Okay, so having done that and confirmed that this works on my own computer, I'm going to flip back to I just want to sort of experiment with. So there's some options, and hopefully, if you take a look at this, we can recognize that this options variable, right? Var options. This is all JavaScript. This is all JavaScript we've learned, right? Var options is, by its curly braces, clearly a JSON object, or an object. And it's got key value pairs, right? We've got the strings title, width, and height, and then title is a string, how much pizza I ate last night, width is 400, height is 300. Obviously, we don't know exactly how these affect things at the moment, but the point is they're there. If I look up here, I see, oh, this, I'm seeing something that says data.addRows. And again, this is pretty descriptive, which is exactly what we would hope for, not just in other people's code that we're using, but in our own code as well. So I'm just going to experiment really quickly here and just say pizza eating, right? As an example, I'm going to save that, flipbook over here, and just see that in fact it changes the visualization. This is a really nice way to play and kind of see what elements of this you can customize, and we'll touch on that a little bit more later. Now, for the moment, we've discussed, of course, the fact that pie charts are not a kind of visualization that we use very often. Sometimes it's the perfect thing, but not frequently. And so one of the handy things about this library is that basically we can use the same structure, the same methods, keep everything almost the same, but by changing one small variable part of it, we can get a different type of visualization. It's one of the reasons why we do this. It's also because it's free and all of these other good things and very powerful. But as it says here, how about a bar chart? And it says convert the pie chart to a bar chart by replacing this part of the code with this part of the code. So I'm actually going to do this, but I'm going to make it a column chart, which is the name that they use to describe a chart with vertical columns instead of so I can do bar chart right here. So I'm just going to replace that and reload my visualization. Boom, it's a bar chart. So they use bar chart to mean horizontal bars. I also they describe this, column chart, a vertical one they describe as a column chart, right? So there we go. We've just done 3 visualizations, right? We changed a tiny bit of code. This is why, I've said to you guys, over time you'll find quite soon that actually the coding isn't the hardest part of it, sort of figuring out everything else. So I want to point out here the data, right? Which is, again, if we look at this data is actually an array of arrays, and we know this because inside this add rows function, right? So we remember that the round parentheses are where we put the ingredients. In this case, our ingredients is an array of arrays. So we've got one array started with the square bracket, and then inside that I've got an array which is 2 items, right? Mushrooms and 3, onions 1. And if we look back at our visualizations, we can see exactly how this corresponds, right? Mushrooms has a value of 3, onions has a value of 1, so on and so forth. This is all great, but not very interesting data, and maybe really not very much of it. So what I want to do is I actually want to start, let's look at some real data. And to do that, I am going to come to one of my favorite data sources, which is the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank has a fantastic sets of data available, actually over 100,000 data series. They get data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, just all kinds of topic areas, and it's really very well organized. And so in this case, I'm just looking at gross national product. This is unadjusted. Great metadata here, which is not often the case, but really sort of explains what you're looking at. And so one of the things I can do is it sort of shows me a preview chart, which is great, but of course I want to get the data for myself. And oops, I'm not going to download, I'm going to view the data. And when I view the data, I get this, actually you can see again in the URL, this is actually a text file, .txt file, and I want to go ahead and get this So what I want, of course, is I want to make this into this format, right? And you can see it's almost there. I want to have the date on the left and I want to have the value on the right. But there's a little bit of a manipulation that I have to do, right? I can't just copy and paste this into my JavaScript right now. I need to do a little bit of work to it. And so I'm just going to start by copying this out here. Okay, and I can see I've got data going back to 1929 all the way up to 2013. And so the first thing I need to do is I need to convert this to what we call a comma-separated value format. And there are a few ways I can try to go about this, but usually that means working with something like Excel. So I'm going to copy this into a text file of its own, and then I'm going to open it in Excel in order to get the commas that I need. Okay, so the process for this is I'm first going to create actually a TXT file, and I'll explain the reasons for this going along the way. Let's just perhaps suffice it to say at this point that I actually know this to be the most efficient method, and we're going to look at some even more efficient methods afterwards, but just so you understand where the process comes from. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a text edit file, and I'm pasting my data in there. All is well. Now, one of the things that I need to do, because on a Mac, the default is to save a so-called rich text format. So the first thing I need to do is under format, I need to say make plain text, and it's going to say, are you sure? And I say, yes, I'm really, really sure. And then I'm going to save this, and I'm going to say, okay, chart, I'm going to say sample data.txt, and go ahead and save that. Okay, so that's great. Next, I need to open up Excel. And I need to import that data into a new worksheet in Excel. So I'm going to say new workbook, and let me just scale this a little bit and go ahead and say, okay, file, open, and what I want to open is my sample data. Now I have some choices to make. Is it delimited or fixed width? Well, it's delimited in that basically there's a space between the two columns of data. And so I need to say, look, there's a space between them. And then the next thing that I need to do, very, very important, is on this date where it's a sort of like year, dash, month, dash, day, I need to make sure that I select that as text. And it's because Excel will otherwise automatically convert it to a format that I happen to know Google Charts won't understand. And so I'm going to say, okay, that's great. I've got all my data here now. And now, believe it or not, I actually am just going to save this again. I'm going to say save as, and I'm going to say sample data, and instead of text, I want to do it as CSV. And so that stands for comma separated value, and I'm going to save that and say continue. And now I'm going to open it up again in Notepad just so I can see what it looks like, this CSV. Okay, and you can see it actually doesn't even show the extension there, but it would be nice if it did. And I'm going to select, where's text edit in here? No, just give me everything, because I really specifically want to see, I want to look at the commas, and the commas are not super obvious if I open it in Excel, right? So now I can see, great, there are commas between my data points. So when we come back in the next segment, we're going to see how I can, there's actually a great online tool called Mr. Data Converter that I can use to convert this from this. So I want to point out that this, now that I have the commas in there, looks actually not hugely dissimilar to this. Couple of things, I don't have the array brackets around it, and I also don't have the quotation marks around my dates. So there's a handy tool called Mr. Data Converter that will do this for us. So when we come back, we're going to see how to use Mr. Data Converter to convert this to a set of a set of arrays like this for us automatically, and then pop that into our code and actually start visualizing some real data. All right, be back in a minute.